A cleaning lady just spoke perfect Chinese to a room full of executives. What she said next saved the company millions and changed her life forever. This is Maria's story, and it'll make you see everyone around you differently. If this moved you, hit subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear Maria's story. See you next week with another incredible journey. Picture this. It's 4 p.m. on a Friday afternoon in downtown Seattle. The executive floors of Sterling Technology are buzzing with the kind of energy that only comes when millions of dollars are on the line. Men in expensive suits pace between glass-walled conference rooms, their voices rising and falling like waves as they discuss market shares and profit margins. And moving silently between them, almost like a ghost, is Maria Chun. She pushes her cleaning cart down the marble hallway, her eyes focused on the floor, her movements practiced and deliberate. To everyone around her, she's just part of the furniture. Invisible, forgettable, just another face in the army of people who keep the building running while the real work happens around them. But here's what none of them know. Maria Chun speaks 5 languages fluently. She has a mind that can process complex business documents faster than most of their expensive consultants. And right now, as she empties their trash cans and wipes down their conference tables, she understands every single word they're saying about their failed expansion into Asia markets. The irony would be funny if it wasn't so heartbreaking. You see, Maria wasn't always invisible. There was a time when her brilliance shone so bright that everyone could see it. Let me take you back 15 years to when Maria was just 8 years old. Imagine a little girl with bright, curious eyes, sitting at a kitchen table covered in books written in 3 different languages. That was Maria. While other kids her age were watching cartoons, she was switching effortlessly between English homework, Korean conversations with her mother, and Spanish stories with her father. Her parents, Young-hee and Eduardo, had one of those beautiful love stories that feels almost too perfect to be real. Young-hee was a brilliant engineering student from Seoul who had come to the University of Washington on an exchange program. Eduardo was a linguistics professor whose passion for languages had taken him around the world. When they met in a coffee shop near campus, arguing about the best way to translate a particularly tricky Korean phrase into Spanish, it was love at first sight. Words build bridges between worlds, Eduardo would tell little Maria, his voice warm with pride as he watched her switch from one language to another like it was the most natural thing in the world. And for Maria, it was natural. By the time she turned 10, she was translating conversations between her Korean grandparents and her Dominican relatives at family gatherings, earning proud smiles from everyone around her. But it wasn't just the languages that made Maria special. She had this incredible ability to see patterns, to understand the deeper meaning behind words. When her father brought home business documents from his job at Sterling Technology, where he was building their entire Asian market division, Maria would read over his shoulder and ask questions that amazed him. "How did you know that, Mija?" he'd ask, using the Spanish word for daughter that always made her feel loved. "The words told me, Papa," she'd answer, and somehow that made perfect sense. On her 13th birthday, Eduardo gave Maria a gift that would change her life forever. It was a jade pen, smooth and cool to the touch, with Chinese characters carved along its length that spelled out, "Knowledge illuminates." The pen had belonged to a great scholar, her father explained, and now it belonged to another great scholar. Maria treasured that pen. When she held it, she could smell the faint scent of sandalwood from her father's study, where they spent countless hours together, diving deep into texts that would challenge graduate students. She carried it everywhere, this symbol of her father's faith in her abilities. And then, in the space of 3 months, everything fell apart. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning. Maria was getting ready for school when she heard her father's voice from the kitchen, tight with stress in a way she'd never heard before. "Strategic restructuring," he was saying to her mother. 15 years building their Asian partnerships, and they're calling it strategic restructuring. Maria didn't understand all the corporate language, but she understood the fear in her parents' voices. Eduardo had been laid off from Sterling Technology. After 15 years of dedicated service, After building relationships that had made the company millions of dollars, they had discarded him with a severance package that barely covered 2 months of rent. And here's the part that still makes my heart ache when I think about it. They didn't just fire him. They made sure he couldn't get hired anywhere else. You see, Eduardo knew too much about Sterling's business strategies, their trade secrets, their plans for Asian expansion. So they quietly spread the word throughout the industry that he was a security risk, someone who might share proprietary information. One by one, doors closed in Eduardo's face. Companies that had once competed for his expertise suddenly had no interest in his calls. The man who had built bridges between worlds found himself stranded on an island, with no way back. But the real nightmare was just beginning. That persistent cough Eduardo had been ignoring, the one he kept saying was just stress from the job search. It wasn't stress. It was stage 4 lung cancer. Can you imagine being Maria during this time? Watching your brilliant, loving father waste away, knowing that the medical bills are piling up faster than the rejection letters. Seeing your mother work 3 different cleaning jobs because her engineering degree from Seoul means nothing without American credentials. The jade pen that had once symbolized knowledge and possibility now felt like a weight in Maria's pocket. A reminder of dreams that seemed further away with each passing day. When Eduardo died 6 months later, he left behind more than just a heartbroken family. He left behind $43,756 in medical debt, a pile of bills that seemed to grow taller every day. Maria was 17 years old when her mother had a stroke. 17, with dreams of studying linguistics in college, with scholarship applications sitting half-finished on her desk. But dreams don't pay for physical therapy. Dreams don't cover rent. Dreams don't keep the lights on when your world is falling apart. So Maria made a choice that no teenager should ever have to make. She dropped out of high school 3 months before graduation and got a job. Not just any job, but a cleaning job at Sterling Technology, the same company that had destroyed her father. The irony was almost too much to bear, but irony doesn't put food on the table. And that's how Maria Chun, once the brightest student in her school, became invisible. She learned to keep her eyes down, to speak in broken English when supervisors were around, to make herself as small and unnoticeable as possible. Because being noticed, she had learned, could be dangerous. For 5 years, Maria lived this double life. During the day, she worked as lingua bridge online, translating complex academic papers and technical documents for $22 an hour. Her clients never saw her face, never knew that their brilliant translator was a young woman who cleaned offices at night. Her reputation in the online translation community was stellar, 4.98 stars, over 400 successful projects, specializing in business and engineering documents. But from 4 p.m. to midnight, she was just Maria the cleaning lady. She emptied trash cans while executives discussed billion-dollar deals. She wiped down conference tables while they planned expansion strategies for markets she understood better than they did. She cleaned their coffee rings while they complained about the challenges of working with Asian partners, never knowing that the woman refilling their water glasses could solve their problems in 3 languages. The arithmetic of survival ruled her life. $1,200 for rent on their tiny apartment, $463 for her mother's medications, $275 for the monthly payment on her father's medical debt, $190 for groceries, $145 for utilities, 60 hours of work every week, leaving no room for savings, no room for error, no room for hope. And then, on this particular Friday in November, everything changed. Maria was polishing the glass trophy case outside the CEO's office when she saw Victor Sterling himself burst through his door, his usually perfect composure cracked like a broken mask. In his hand was a thick document with a Shanghai postmark, and even from across the hall, Maria could see the logo of Huang Technology Innovations, one of China's largest semiconductor manufacturers. She had seen that look before. Panic. The same expression her father had worn when he realized Sterling had blacklisted him throughout the industry. By noon, the executive floor was in chaos. Urgent meetings were called. Phone calls were made to Tokyo and Beijing. And then came the announcement that would change Maria's life forever. Victor Sterling stood in the main conference room, waving that mysterious document above his head like a battle flag. His voice carried the particular kind of desperation that comes when millions of dollars hang in the balance. Anyone, he announced to the room full of executives, anyone who can translate this acquisition proposal gets my daily salary. $27,000 for $100. The room erupted in nervous laughter. These were Harvard MBAs, executives who had never doubted their own capabilities. The idea that none of them could handle a simple translation problem was almost funny. Maybe we should just use Google Translate, joked Derek Morrison, the VP of Operations, his Harvard class ring catching the light as he gestured dismissively. More laughter. But Maria, standing quietly in the corner with her cleaning cart, wasn't laughing. Because she could see several characters on the cover page of that document, technical terms her father had taught her years ago, specifications that she recognized from her online translation work. Maybe even the cleaning lady can try, Sterling added, his eyes falling on Maria with the kind of casual cruelty that only comes for a lifetime of privilege. Though I doubt they teach Mandarin in housekeeping school. The laughter was sharper this time, more cutting. Maria kept her eyes down, focusing on the circular motion of her cloth against the mahogany table. But inside her jacket pocket, her fingers closed around her father's jade pen. $27,000 for $100. The exact amount she needed to stop the eviction notice that had arrived that morning. 72 hours before the court hearing that would leave her family homeless. As the executives dispersed, still chuckling about their translator problem, Maria slipped quietly from the room. Invisible once more. But for the first time in 5 years, she wasn't thinking about staying hidden. She was thinking about her father's words. Words build bridges between worlds. And she was thinking about the bridge that had just appeared in front of her. A bridge made of Chinese characters and desperate executives, leading from invisibility to a chance at something more. The question hanging in the air as she pushed her cart down that marble hallway wasn't whether she could translate the document. Maria knew she could do it better than anyone in that room. The question was whether she had the courage to step out of the shadows and let them see who she really was. 72 hours. That's all she had to decide. But sometimes 72 hours is enough to change everything. Have you ever had a moment where you knew exactly what you needed to do, but the fear was so overwhelming that you felt paralyzed? That's where we find Maria on Friday night, standing in her tiny kitchen at 1:43 a.m., staring at two pieces of paper that held her entire future in their hands. One was the eviction notice, 72 hours until the court hearing that would make her family homeless. The other was a photograph she had secretly taken of the Huang technology document, its Chinese characters practically glowing under the fluorescent light. In the next room, her mother slept fitfully, medical monitors casting blue shadows across her face. He had no idea that her daughter was about to make a decision that could save them or destroy them completely. Maria picked up her father's jade pen, feeling its familiar weight. For 5 years, this pen had been her secret companion, her connection to the brilliant person she used to be. But using it now, stepping out of shadows after so long, that felt like jumping off a cliff without knowing if there was water below. She made her choice, but not the choice you might think. You see, Maria had learned something important during her years of invisibility. Sometimes the smartest move is to test the water before you dive in. So instead of marching into Sterling's offices and announcing her qualifications, she decided to be strategic. Saturday night found her back at Sterling Technology, but this time she wasn't there to clean. Well, not exactly. Her cleaning uniform was the perfect disguise for after-hours access. The security guard, Mike, barely looked up as she wheeled her cart past his station. Working weekend, overtime, he asked the same question he'd asked dozens of times before. Mi madre needs medicine, Maria replied, exaggerating her accent, playing the role they expected. It wasn't even a lie. But here's what Mike didn't know. Maria wasn't there to empty trash cans. She was there to save a company that had destroyed her father. The executive floor stood eerily quiet, so different from the chaos of Friday afternoon. In the main conference room, The executives had left their translation attempts scattered across whiteboards and notebooks. Maria walked slowly around the room, reading their work, and what she saw made her wince. They'd gotten almost everything wrong. The document's title, which they thought said Partnership Opportunity, actually read Exclusive Manufacturing Contract. A section they had translated as Flexible Timeline actually specified strict deadlines with penalty clauses. Most critically, they had completely misunderstood a technical section about workforce requirements that could cost hundreds of jobs. Using her jade pen, Maria carefully corrected 3 critical sections. She translated complex semiconductor terminology with a precision that only came from years of study with her father and hundreds of online translation projects. When she finished, she signed her work simply, Night Owl. It was a test, specific enough to demonstrate real expertise, but limited enough to seem like helpful hints rather than a complete solution. She wanted to see how they would react before revealing herself completely. By Sunday morning, her anonymous assistants had created quite a stir. Maria arrived early with her cleaning card, her heart pounding as she lingered near the conference room door. Inside, she could hear voices raised in confusion and excitement. Who the hell is Night Owl? Victor Sterling's voice cut through the morning air like a knife. Security says nobody unauthorized entered the building, Derek Morrison replied. Maria could practically see him adjusting his Harvard class ring, a nervous habit she'd observed over years of invisible cleaning. Must be someone on our team, Sterling concluded. Maria pressed closer to the gap in the door, watching as Morrison studied the whiteboard where she had left her corrections. For a moment, she allowed herself to hope. Maybe he would acknowledge the anonymous help. Maybe he would try to find Night Owl to give them credit. Instead, she watched in disbelief as Morrison casually erased her signature. Actually, Morrison said, his voice smooth as silk, I did this part. I've been studying Mandarin privately. Didn't want to make a big deal of it until I was more fluent. But given the emergency, Sterling clapped him on the shoulder. Finally, some initiative around here. Take point on this, Morrison. Coordinate the team's efforts. Maria's small victory turned to ash in her mouth. Not only had Morrison stolen credit for her work, but now he was being promoted to project lead based on her expertise. The injustice burned in her chest, but she couldn't afford the luxury of indignation. Not with 48 hours remaining before eviction. That night, Maria made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of the weekend. Sitting at her kitchen table, while her mother slept, she spread out the photographed documents and began translating the entire contract. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Buried deep in the technical sections was language about workforce optimization requirements. Maria had seen enough corporate documents to recognize euphemisms when she saw them. This wasn't just about manufacturing processes. Huang Technology was requiring Sterling to lay off 300 workers at their Seattle plant in exchange for reduced production costs. Among those workers would be families from her own community. People like Mrs. Park, who cleaned offices on the 3rd floor and was finally able to bring her grandchildren to America. People like Carlos from maintenance, whose wife had just started cancer treatment. Maria sat back in her chair, the jade pen suddenly heavy in her hand. She could complete the translation anonymously and enable more families to suffer the same fate as hers. Or she could reveal herself and risk everything she'd worked to protect. Her phone buzzed with a text that made the decision even more complicated. It was from her supervisor. New security cameras installed in executive wing. All cleaning staff must complete tasks before 7 p.m. until further notice. The window was closing. With her after-hours access restricted, Maria would have to find other ways to continue her anonymous help. What followed was perhaps the most desperate weekend of Maria's life. She hid in bathroom stalls during her breaks, translating frantically on scraps of paper. She worked through lunch in supply closets, racing against both Sterling's deadline and her own eviction notice. 58 hours until the court hearing. 56 hours until Huang's deadline. By Monday evening, Maria had completed about 40% of the document translation. She carefully placed more Night Owl notes in the conference room during her cleaning shift, watching as Morrison continued to claim credit with growing confidence. But Morrison wasn't stupid. Harvard MBA or not, he was starting to notice patterns. And on Tuesday morning, everything came crashing down. "We have a security breach." The words cut through the executive meeting like a blade. Maria, arranging coffee service with shaking hands, kept her expression carefully neutral as Sterling's security chief played footage from the weekend. "The cameras caught someone in the conference room after hours," the security chief explained. "The angle doesn't show a face, but we know someone was accessing confidential materials." "Investigate everyone," Sterling ordered, his voice sharp with paranoia, "especially maintenance staff with after-hours access." By afternoon, security guards were interviewing all cleaning personnel. When Maria's turn came, she slipped back into the role that had protected her for 5 years. The simple cleaner who barely spoke English, confused by complicated questions. "No understand problem," she repeated, hating herself for the stereotype, but recognizing its power to make her invisible. "I clean only, no touch papers." The security chief seemed satisfied, but Morrison lingered after the interview. Maria could feel his eyes on her as she prepared to leave. "Interesting," he said once they were alone. "You seem to understand English perfectly when I'm giving cleaning instructions." Maria shrugged, keeping her eyes down. "Instructions simple, questions complicated." Morrison leaned closer, and Maria caught a whiff of his expensive cologne mixed with something else, suspicion. "I think you understand more than you let on," he said quietly. "Much more." That evening, Maria's world tilted further off its axis. She opened her locker to find it had been searched. Her heart sank when she realized what was missing. Her father's jade pen, her talisman, her connection to everything she used to be. "Looking for this?" Morrison's voice made her spin around. He was standing in the empty break room, twirling the jade pen between his fingers like it was just another office supply. "Quite an unusual item for a cleaning lady," he continued, examining the carved characters. "These symbols here, they mean knowledge, don't they?" Maria reached for it instinctively, but Morrison pulled it back. "Security is very concerned about unauthorized items that could be used for corporate espionage," he said, his Harvard class ring catching the fluorescent light. "I've taken the liberty of filing a report." By Wednesday morning, HR had issued Maria a formal warning for possession of unauthorized materials and suspicious behavior. Without her jade pen, without her connection to her father, Maria felt completely unmoored. 34 hours until eviction. Her mother had been taken to the emergency room with chest pains, depleting their meager savings for the ambulance copay. The apartment manager had posted the final eviction notice. Desperate times call for desperate measures. During her lunch break, Maria used every skill her father had taught her about navigating corporate systems. She accessed Morrison's computer while he attended a meeting, her fingers flying across the keyboard. What she found horrified her. Morrison hadn't just stolen credit for her work. He had deliberately mistranslated key sections of the Huang proposal. Sections that would not only harm workers, but potentially violate international trade laws. Sterling was about to sign an agreement that could trigger federal investigations and massive fines. When Maria returned to her cleaning duties, Morrison was waiting for her. "I know it's you," he said without preamble. The mysterious translator. Maria's carefully constructed mask began to slip. "I checked the personnel files," Morrison continued. "Your mother is Min Chun, formerly Min Young-hee from Seoul. Your father worked here until how shall I put it, right-sized him." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. Eduardo Vega, the man whose expertise had built Sterling's Asian division, whose knowledge had made them millions, whose firing had started their family's descent into poverty. "Give me back my pen," Maria said, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. Morrison smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "After I speak with immigration about your mother's visa status." "Expired, isn't it? Since your father's death?" "Would be a shame if authorities were notified." The threat hung between them like poison in the air. "Speak up and face deportation. Stay silent and watch while Sterling committed corporate suicide and hundreds of workers lost their jobs." 30 hours until eviction. 24 hours until Huang's deadline. Maria had never felt more trapped. But sometimes, when you're backed into a corner with nowhere to go, you discover reserves of courage you never knew you had. As she walked away from Morrison's threats, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to hide anymore. She wasn't going to let fear control her choices. Her father had always told her that words build bridges between worlds. Tomorrow, she would use her words to build the most important bridge of her life. The bridge between who she had been forced to become and who she really was. The jade pen might be gone, but the knowledge it had symbolized lived on in her mind, in her heart, in her voice. And tomorrow, for the first time in 5 years, Maria Chun was going to let that voice be heard, even if it destroyed her. Thursday morning, 9 a.m. sharp, 24 hours before Huang Technology's deadline, and exactly the same amount of time before Maria's family would lose their home forever. The emergency board meeting was called for the conference room where Maria had spent 5 years being invisible. But today, as she wheeled in the coffee cart with trembling hands, everything felt different. The air seemed thicker, charged with the kind of tension that comes when millions of dollars hang in the balance. Sterling Technology's entire future was about to be decided, and nobody in that room knew that the person pouring their coffee held all the answers. Victor Sterling sat at the head of the table, his usually perfect composure cracked around the edges. Board members shuffled through papers, their faces grave. And there, standing confidently at the presentation screen, was Derek Morrison, Harvard ring catching the light as he prepared to deliver what he believed would be his moment of triumph. "Ladies and gentlemen," Morrison began, his voice smooth with practiced confidence, "I'm pleased to present my completed translation of the Huang Technology proposal." Maria kept her eyes down, arranging pastries on the side table while her heart hammered against her ribs. Everything she had worked for, everything her family needed, was about to be destroyed by Morrison's lies. "As you can see," Morrison continued, clicking to his PowerPoint, "the terms are highly favorable. Huang is offering exclusive manufacturing at rates 15% below market value, with minimal quality control oversight." Maria's hands nearly dropped the water pitcher. He had gotten it completely backwards. The document actually specified stringent quality control protocols with 15% higher tolerance standards than industry average. This wasn't just a mistranslation. This was corporate suicide. "Their only unusual request," Morrison went on, butchering the pronunciation of technical terms so badly that Maria couldn't help but wince, "is accelerated production using what translates roughly as modified staff allocations." Modified staff allocations. Maria's blood ran cold. Morrison was deliberately obscuring the fact that the contract would require laying off 300 workers. People with families. People from her own community. People whose lives would be destroyed just like her father's had been. There's a technical section about the Luong Moxingji process that's still somewhat unclear, Morrison admitted, massacring the pronunciation so thoroughly that it sounded like gibberish. And that's when something inside Maria snapped. "Ludong Moxing," she corrected softly, the proper Mandarin tones flowing from her lips like water. The room went dead silent. Every head turned toward her. Morrison's face went pale. "Excuse me." Sterling's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Maria straightened her shoulders, years of enforced invisibility falling away like a shed skin. "It's Ludong Moxing," she repeated, her voice growing stronger. "It means fluid modeling system for thermal management and semiconductor manufacturing. It has nothing to do with staff reallocation." You could have heard a pin drop. Morrison sputtered, his Harvard confidence evaporating. "How dare you interrupt? You speak Mandarin?" Sterling interrupted, studying Maria as if seeing her for the first time. And in that moment, Maria made the choice that would change everything. No more hiding. No more fear. Her father had taught her that words build bridges between worlds, and it was time to build the most important bridge of her life. "Mandarin, Korean, Spanish, and English," she answered, meeting Sterling's eyes directly. "I also read Japanese. though my spoken fluency is limited. She's lying, Morrison interjected desperately. She's just a cleaner. Maria pulled out her phone with steady hands. My father was Eduardo Vega, she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. He built your Asian market division before your strategic restructuring 5 years ago. He taught me business languages and technical terminology since childhood. Recognition flickered in Sterling's eyes. Vega, I remember him. This is absurd, Morrison protested, but sweat was beading on his forehead. She's probably working for our competitors. Check my credentials, Maria challenged, displaying her phone screen to the room. I work online as LinguaBridge. For 0.98-star rating with over 400 academic and technical translations completed. I specialize in engineering and business documents. Sterling took her phone, scrolling through the impressive client testimonials and reviews. His business instincts were clearly wrestling with his prejudices, and for a moment, Maria watched the calculation happen in real time. But she wasn't finished. 5 years of watching injustice from the shadows had given her knowledge that went far beyond translation skills. Mr. Morrison's translation mentions nothing about quality control protocols, she continued, addressing the board directly. It also obscures the fact that Huang Tech is requiring you to lay off 300 manufacturing workers as a condition of the deal, which would violate 3 separate labor agreements you've signed. The board members began murmuring, looking between Morrison and Maria with growing confusion. This is outrageous, Morrison sputtered. You can't possibly. Page 16, paragraph 4. Maria recited from memory, her father's training coming back like muscle memory. The characters clearly state that Sterling Enterprises must implement workforce reduction measures of no less than 300 positions within 60 days of contract execution. I can read the entire section verbatim if you'd like. The room erupted. Board members demanded to see the original document. Morrison's face had gone from pale to red to purple. And Sterling was looking at Maria with a mixture of shock, calculation, and what might have been respect. You claim you can translate this entire document accurately? He asked. I've already translated about 60% of it, Maria admitted, the truth spilling out like water through a broken dam. I was leaving anonymous notes to help. The ones Mr. Morrison has been taking credit for. All eyes turned to Morrison, whose face now resembled a ripe tomato. You were Night Owl? Sterling asked. Maria nodded. A slow smile spread across Sterling's face, not warm, but predatory, recognizing an opportunity. My offer stands, he said. Translate the complete document by tomorrow's deadline, and my daily salary is yours. $27,400. But Maria had learned something important over the past week. Knowledge was power, but only if you knew how to use it. I want it in writing, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. And I want my pen back. Your pen? Sterling frowned. My Jade translator's pen. Mr. Morrison confiscated it yesterday and filed it as suspicious material. All eyes turned to Morrison, who reluctantly pulled the pen from his jacket pocket like a child caught stealing candy. And Maria continued, momentum building. I want a written contract guaranteeing my continued employment regardless of the translation outcome, with a confidentiality clause protecting my mother's immigration status. The audacity of her demands sent ripples through the room. Here was a woman who had been pouring their coffee 5 minutes ago, now negotiating like a seasoned executive. Sterling studied her for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room, including Maria. He smiled, a real smile. Draw up the agreement, he instructed his assistant, and get Ms. Chun whatever resources she needs. But Maria's story doesn't end there. In fact, the most challenging part was just beginning. That night, Maria worked with a focus and determination she hadn't felt since her father's death. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, the returned jade pen in her hand, guiding her through the complex technical terminology that Morrison had butchered. By 3 a.m., exhaustion was taking its toll, but she pushed through. This wasn't just about the money anymore. This was about proving that her father's legacy lived on. This was about showing the world that brilliance doesn't always come in the package you expect. As dawn broke, Maria put the finishing touches on her translation. But she had discovered something that would make this more than just a business transaction. The contract wasn't as exploitative as she had initially feared, but it wasn't as rosy as Morrison had painted either. The truth was nuanced, complex, exactly the kind of document that required not just translation, but cultural interpretation. At 8:58 a.m., Maria walked into the boardroom where executives had gathered for the video conference with Huang Technology. She placed her completed translation before Sterling, who scanned it with the intensity of a man whose fortune was on the line. "The video call is starting," his assistant announced. And then something magical happened. When the screen flickered to life, showing Lin Huang and his executive team in Shanghai, Maria saw a familiar face beside the CEO. Mr. Zhang, her father's former colleague and friend. "Miss Chun," Zhang said in Mandarin, his face lighting up with recognition. "It is an honor to meet Eduardo's daughter." He spoke of your linguistic gifts often. Maria responded in flawless Mandarin, and suddenly the entire dynamic of the negotiation shifted. This wasn't just about business anymore. This was about relationships, respect, and recognizing talent regardless of its packaging. "We weren't aware of your employment here," Lin Huang interjected, "until our intelligence team noted someone was accurately translating our deliberately complex proposal. Very few people could navigate those technical terms correctly." Sterling looked between them, understanding nothing of the rapid Mandarin exchange, but recognizing its importance. "Mr. Huang says they included technical complexities as a test," Maria explained in English. "They wanted to see if Sterling still retained the expertise my father helped build." "And do we pass?" Sterling asked cautiously. Maria switched back to Mandarin, addressing Huang directly. What followed was a conversation that would have been impossible with any other translator. A nuanced discussion of cultural expectations, business relationships, and mutual respect. When Morrison tried to interject, claiming the conversation was getting out of hand, Maria calmly pulled out her phone and showed security footage she had obtained through legitimate channels. Clear evidence of Morrison sabotaging her work and stealing her translations. "Mr. Morrison," Sterling said quietly, "watching the indisputable evidence, you're fired. Security will escort you out." As Morrison was removed, protesting loudly, Huang made one final condition via the video link. They insisted on working directly with Maria as their cultural liaison, not just for this contract, but for all future business between the companies. The jade pen moved confidently across Maria's notes as she translated the final terms in real time, its smooth surface catching the morning light. No longer a memento of loss, but an instrument of her authority. "They insist on working directly with me as a condition of the deal," Maria explained to Sterling, the power dynamic in the room shifting completely. With millions at stake and the deadline looming, Sterling had no choice but to agree. The contract was signed. The $27,400 was paid. But Huang had one more surprise. A $50,000 consulting bonus specifically for Maria's cultural expertise. 6 months later, Maria sat in her new office as Director of International Relations at Sterling Technology. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of Seattle where she had once felt invisible. Her desk, polished walnut, not pressed composite, held a framed photo of her mother, now receiving specialized care in a facility close to their new apartment. The jade translator's pen rested in a crystal stand, its surface catching the morning light. When she held it now, the sandalwood scent mingled with fresh orchids she kept beside her father's photograph. Her first official act as director had been establishing a scholarship fund in her father's name and implementing a comprehensive review of the company's hiring practices. Her second had been creating the Hidden Talents Initiative, a company-wide program encouraging employees at all levels to showcase their skills and education. The results were remarkable. The former security guard with an engineering degree from Lagos, the cafeteria worker who spoke 6 languages, the maintenance staff member with a gift for product design. Maria had discovered that Sterling Technology had been sitting on a gold mine of untapped talent. The Huang contract had increased Sterling's Asian market share by 32% in just 2 quarters. The board members who had once looked through her now addressed her as Director Chun with genuine respect. Even Victor Sterling had developed a grudging admiration for her abilities. As he had put it in the last shareholders' meeting, Ms. Chen's unique perspective has proven unexpectedly valuable. Corporate speak for, I was wrong about her, but Maria would take it. Her phone chimed with a text from her mother's physical therapist. Improvements continuing ahead of schedule. Maria smiled, allowing herself a moment of pure happiness. As she prepared for the monthly board meeting, Maria reflected on how much had changed. 6 months ago, she had been invisible in that room, cleaning coffee rings while executives made decisions affecting thousands of lives. Today, she would present her international expansion strategy, a plan projected to create 450 new jobs. Morrison, meanwhile, had become a cautionary tale in corporate circles. His attempted sabotage and stolen credit had made headlines in business journals as an example of toxic workplace behavior. No major tech firm would hire him now. Walking toward the boardroom, Maria was greeted by employees in multiple languages: English, Spanish, Mandarin, Korean. Each interaction a small bridge between worlds, exactly as her father had envisioned. Good morning. She began her presentation in 3 languages, watching the board members' appreciative nods. Today, we're going to discuss how embracing multiple perspectives transforms not just our culture, but our bottom line. Her first slide displayed the 32% market share increase alongside a 24% improvement in employee retention since implementing her initiatives. Talent doesn't always arrive in expected packages, she continued. But companies that recognize it regardless of its wrapping gain tremendous competitive advantage. The jade pen moved confidently across her notes as she guided the company's leadership into a future her father could only have dreamed of. A future where bridges between worlds had become highways of opportunity. After the presentation, as board members filed out discussing the impressive projections, Maria remained behind for a moment. She picked up her father's pen, feeling its familiar weight, smelling that faint trace of sandalwood. "We did it, Papa," she whispered. "We built the bridge." And in that quiet moment, surrounded by the symbols of her success, but grounded in the memory of her father's love, Maria Chun understood something profound. She had never really been invisible. She had always been exactly who she was meant to be. The world had simply needed time to learn how to see. Sometimes the most extraordinary people are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to look beyond the surface. Maria's story reminds us that talent, intelligence, and brilliance don't always come dressed in expensive suits or carrying prestigious degrees. They might come carrying a mop and speaking with an accent. They might be cleaning your office while understanding your business better than you do. They might be one courageous moment away from changing everything. The question isn't whether these hidden talents exist around us. They do. The question is, are we brave enough to see them? And when we do, are we ready to step aside and let them shine? Maria was invisible for 5 years because people judged her by her uniform, not her mind. But brilliant people are everywhere. They might be cleaning your office, serving your coffee, or guarding your building. This week, try something simple. Learn the name of someone you see but never really notice. Ask them about their day. You never know what amazing story they're carrying. If this moved you, hit subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear Maria's story. See you next week with another incredible journey.